Okay, good morning, Chicago. Good morning, Chicago. You can see that the snow is still very much a part of the ball game here in Chicago. And I wanted to do a little bit of a live stream. Task Force is, of course, we've got our water taxi just leaving now. I wanted to do a little bit of a live stream while Task Force, I don't smoke, but somebody left them. Wanted to do a little bit of a talk about some of the different things going on here and kind of this kind of deep state war that's not necessarily obvious, but I believe it's going on. And just catching our breath before we all jump to war, like we did in Iraq, where we ended up there like 11 or 12 years, or in Afghanistan, where we ended up there 17 years and we're still fighting that war. It seems very much like building a hotel like Trump Tower, which is just around the corner you can't quite see. Are they coming for you, Rom? This early? Now, a lot of people mentioned, when I did the salute to the fire ambulance yesterday, that Rom may very well have been dressed as a woman and trying to make his exit again out of the city. So there was that possibility, and I'm sorry I didn't allow for that. I just was saluting the people that were driving the ambulance. I wasn't thinking about Rom hiding in the back as a nurse. So, but you could see if you were trying to build rail cars in China instead of Chicago, where you might want to have to use that kind of escape. But let's get back to the issue at hand here. What we're really talking about today is the power of the press, the power of cable news, the power of mass media, to send a whole nation plunging into war without really thinking about it. And of course, as there's other channels that have described how much I am a descendant of the Hearsts, so I had a chance to call William Randolph Hearst this morning. Of course, William Randolph Hearst had a whole consortium, a whole network, a whole syndicate of papers. I remember Granddad when I would get up in the castle, and he would have 15 phones all cradled on each side, and he was telling different news editors in different cities what the title was going to be. So no respite for Spain, and Spaniards out of Cuba, and he would have a slightly different angle on all the different titles. I'm wondering if that's not what we have now, only it's just called the Broadcast Board of Governors, right? It's the Broadcast Board of Governors, and governors in the worst sense of the word, meaning we're going to tell you what to write. And indeed, there is a lot of talk about a 4 a.m. Cut sheet that goes out to all the I can't remember her name right now, it's CNN, wife of Tom Nidus, to tell them, hey, here are the big talking points this morning. I saw Adam Kitzinger from Illinois, I want to say 14, but I'm guessing, from Kankakee, Adam Kitzinger from Kankakee saying, hey, Trump doesn't need authorization from Congress. He can just go plunge right ahead, plunge the nation straight into war. Forget about the War Powers Act, and forget about informing Congress and having a debate or anything like that. Let's just go ahead and start bombing. Whether Russia did the attack or not, or Iran did the attack, let's just start bombing like Israel did. Well, I think they're cleaning out the whole cabinet. That's not just one or two, Rom. They're coming for everybody. Everybody who called in the Mossad airstrike, I think they're cleaning out the whole top deck there, Ron. We'll get down to the Flamingo and the Picasso. There's good reason to believe here that... Is Wiener in town as well? Is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, did they have a United Center Superbox event? Now, there is an ugly rumor going on in Chicago right now that Rom has learned to drive a fire engine, and he is making his way around the city, and he's got a very long handlebar mustache. Let's see if we can pick him up as he comes by. He seems to need a little bit of a booster seat. I have to believe that wasn't Rom. The guy had pretty wide, broad shoulders, so I'm going to go ahead and just say right now, I don't think that was Rom. But and I don't really mean to pick on Mossad. I don't want to talk about old Mossad. Maybe that's Rahm's entourage. I really want to talk about kind of the business interests of war. I remember when Grandpappy Hearst would talk about that, the money, the spoils of war. So many years ago at San Simeon. But yesterday we filmed down at Federal Plaza, and as you all know, they were closing in and demanding documents from the DOJ to go over to Bob Goodlatte in the House Judiciary, and also over to Devin Nunes in House Intel. And we showed the relationship of how close the guy who was put in charge of that activity, a guy named Lausch, Lausch, was to the head of the counterterrorism division in the FBI, Bill Priestap. I mean, very close. But it goes deeper than that. And, he's married to someone named Sabina Menschel. Now, you might say Sabina Menschel, Sabina Schmenzel. And what does that mean to me? Well, it goes back to what I've been saying about privatizing, like CrowdStrike, privatizing our intelligence community for private profit. And Sabina Menschel is one of the top lawyers at a kind of a Fusion GPS type firm called Nardello. Nardello has a lot of ring to, of other words that rhyme with Nardello, but Nardello is kind of one of these covert, operative, kind of attorney-client privilege-based, spy firms in Washington, D.C. I don't think anybody doubts that. I think if Sabina Nardello was right here, we had her say that, she'd say, well, you left out the part about super spy. She would be the first person to say, yeah, we're super spies. Well, if you look at who Sabina Nardello's parents are, one of them is Celine Menschel, Menschel, and Celine Menschel was Goldman Sachs. She was VP Goldman Sachs. And when you're at Goldman Sachs, you can invest in a whole panoply of things. It's hard to really pin you down into, that was depleted uranium. Oh, that was whatever. That was this spoils of war investment. That was that spoils of war investment. But the real player is Bob Menschel. Bob Menschel is a billionaire. He's one of the top guys. He has an endowment at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. He has an endowment at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I believe he's based here in Chicago, though. But anyway, he's quite a wheel. He's got the philanthropy prize from Carnegie in 2015. He's quite the investor. Okay, and so he's quoted a lot in Forbes and so forth, and he talks about value-based investment and so forth. But he's a billionaire. Now, when they want to go to war, what they do is they pick up the phone and they call Rahm and say, Rahm, you've got some guys at the lower levels of the Israeli Air Force, IDF. Why don't we just put a little fire on, T4 over there in the middle part of Syria? Let's get this to be a shooting war. Let's try to get Trump all jacked up and make this a shooting war. Is that what happens? Yeah, that's what happens. Because there's all sorts of business for Nardello at that point to do covert operations overseas and so forth. It's a real rainmaker. So this is not like 18 steps removed to Mossad, Avi Braverman's Mossad of the Negev. This is like one hop from Bill Priestap when his uncle. Hey, Uncle Bob, where do we invade today? How do I, exfiltrate a whole bunch of business to my wife today? That's where what we're talking about. So I think it's time to kind of peel back the onion a little bit and look at the motives of the people involved here and stop with this kind of knee-jerk reaction saying, Spaniards out of Cuba, remember the Maine, all that kind of stuff. Although, I remember when we used to have tea up here at the top of the of the Wrigley Building with Grandpa Hearst. It was quite a thing. So everyone wonders where Task Force is. Task Force is doing her thing. She researches crazy in the morning. She's just up early and she's always researching. So we're gonna have a lot of stuff on the south side of Chicago a little bit later today. So we're not gonna talk about that right now. But I wanted to mention the Menschels, because if you don't mention the Menschels, you don't get the essentials. To really understand this war and what's behind this war, you have to mention the Menschels, and understand the essentials. These are the essentials of war, not the trimmings, not the, Grandpa Hearst with all the phones saying this is what the headline's going to read today. You got to look beneath the headlines, beneath the story, and get the true story, which is there's a lot of business interests that make a lot of money. And as I did in my first piece this morning, there's also a way, this kind of a cleansing action. You have a war and then you have a big flood, it kind of cleanses everything. That's why they always at the end of the war want to break the dams. It just kind of cleanses everything out. Same kind of thing here. There are 57 sites where chemical weapons were used by ISIS. Again, we funded it by ISIS in Iraq. It's still very cold here in Chicago. Still a whole bunch of sites in Syria where we took oil fields in Syria. And what a great thing to go back in with all the same, cast of characters that John McCain loves to meet with surreptitiously right before chemical weapons attacks, or Mark Rubio. We did it with in Libya with Gaddafi. Why not do it over here, with ISIS and the King Abdullah in Jordan? Why not do it again? Gee whiz, it sounds like a lot of fun. So that's the big thing I wanted to say this morning. Let's catch our breath. Let's think about it. Just because Adam Kitzinger, rode around in a Humvee for a little bit doesn't mean he declares foreign policy in the United States. We do have something called the War Powers Act. We do have a balance of powers. We should have a debate about this, going to war. We should look at who's really driving this. Is it really because the coup didn't go so well? Isn't that what really is happening here? The coup didn't go so well. The Comey, Lynch, McCabe, Rosenstein, Priestap coup kind of fell on its face. So what do we have now? We have Bill Priestap basically over at the Federal Plaza here in Chicago, where, don't worry, we'll broadcast later. And he's, calling the shots. He's calling over to Rahm, a couple of blocks away, Calder to Picasso. There's a Calder artwork. It looks a lot like a Picasso, and Rahm has a Picasso over by City Hall. And he's saying, hey, what can we do to, kind of push Trump into this kind of knee-jerk reaction? Well, I know, we'll hit a site and kill a bunch of Iranians. Okay, well, great. I mean, maybe that's the response that we need, but maybe we need to sit back, think about this. All the targets are going to stay right where they are. You can't move a missile base, or you can move ships, but you can't move all these fixed targets. You can move some trucks around, but I mean, for the most part, the bombing targets are the same. When Obama had the same decision. And Obama, if you remember correctly, I don't want to make anybody mad, but he said to Fadan, Turkish intelligence, we know it's you. We know you were the guys who did the chemical weapons attack in Aleppo, and we're not going to do it. I'm not going to cross this red line because it's a fake red line. Trump should do the same thing. Got to think about this before we plunge the whole country into war. So I'm going to take a few questions here, and then we'll wrap it up here. It's very bright. So, all right. Wow. So it's impossible to read, so I'm going to give up on that. But later we'll be broadcasting from Hearst Castle. We'll be going through all of our inventions for the time phone. No, I'm just kidding. No, actually, I want to say that episode that Quinn did was actually pretty good about my dad. There was a lot of facts that were covered initially before you got to the time phone and before you got to Hearst Castle that were actually really right on the money. And a lot of those did actually go into an investment firm here in Chicago, and I do believe that's one of the reasons they bought the patent and got the patent for Google, for Motorola first, then to Google. So we'll talk about that later. I'm going to leave it right there. Thanks, everybody. It's been a great having my morning cup of joe with you all. And I can't read the questions, unfortunately, otherwise I would answer them. But you've got to mention the Menschels. I guess the essentials are you got to mention the Menschels, because if you don't understand the Menschels, you're not going to understand actually who's calling the shots. Why? And I didn't mean to say Rahm called in to some colonel running some air base and did the T4 attack. I'm sure in Homs. I'm sure Bibi had to sign off on it, and they said, Bibi, we're going to run you up on, charges if you don't, sign off on this one. But this is the old Mossad wisdom where you go, look, why do you want to do this? We're going to make money. Just go into southern Syria, sit down with Cheney and Woolsey and the whole crew and the Rothschild and stuff. Say, we're going to take 30 miles of Golan Heights. We're going to give you 50. You get 50. Here's your 50. And, be happy with the 50. Otherwise, we're going to, start bombing. If you're going to just be strong arming because you want the Golan Heights, there's no reason to kill all these women and kids. Just go in there strong and say, hey, we're going to make the bigger Israel play. We're going to take 30. And here's your 50. We're done. Trump's a deal maker. We don't need to do all this bombing where then, you know what, let's leave Raytheon out of this and let's leave McCain out of this. Just do it at the business table. Do it at the table. When Trump built Trump Tower, he didn't say, hell, I got a great idea, let's build Trump Tower. No, it's a